So there's two kind of basic ways of parenting. When there's a lot of parenting experts, and there's actually punishment is one way and discipline is the second way. Punishment is based on how do I control my child to make them turn out the way I want them to? How do I control? So do I use shaming, fear, intimidation? What do I do to control them? So it's really about the parent having control. So discipline is based on teaching and guiding your child. So how do I teach them? What disciple? Discipline comes from disciple. So how do I teach and guide? How do I influence my children? And they're going to actually turn out the way what's best for them. So we give much more freedom to kids in terms of making choices for their lives.
Greetings, hello, good day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining Truehope Cast, the official podcast of Truehope Canada. If you're not familiar with Truehope Canada, we are a mind and body-based supplement company that is dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non-invasive nutritional means. For more information about us, you can easily visit truehopecanada.com. If you're listening on iTunes, please leave us a review. It's very, very helpful. Today, I welcome family happiness expert and parenting coach Cynthia Klein to the show. Cynthia Klein's passion is to create world peace by creating peace within each family. As the author of Ally Parenting, she has created a unique formula for parents to transform conflict into cooperation. For more than 29 years, she has spoken in person at hundreds of schools and organizations, successfully coached parents of 5 to 25-year-olds, and taught numerous online courses based on her highly effective Ally Parenting approach. She earned her child psychology degree at UC Berkeley, taught elementary school, and is certified in adult education. Today, we're going to discuss some of the common challenges that parents have and how cultivating relationships in the family is absolutely essential. Enjoy the show. All right. Hello, Cynthia. Welcome to Truehope Cast. Really appreciate you coming on today and giving us your time. How are you?
It's great to be here and lovely to meet you and get to know you better, Simon.
Wonderful. Well, why not as an intro, just let us know who you are and what is it that you do.
So I'm Cynthia Klein, and for the last 28 years, I have worked with parents of 5 to 25-year-olds who they're not happy with the relationship that they're having right now with their kids. Like maybe they're not communicating well, maybe they feel like the kids aren't cooperating, or they don't like how they're interacting. They don't like what's coming out of their mouth and what they're thinking, saying, and doing. And so I am an educator. I got my degree in child psychology. I went on to be a school teacher. So I am not a therapist. I am somebody who teaches specific skills on language and thought that will actually shift their relationship so they can achieve what they're hoping to achieve, and which is always a more connected relationship to their kids.
Wonderful. Why that age group? Why 5 to 25?
Well, I work a lot on language. So young kids, they aren't as capable to do the problem solving that I like to teach. And then up to 25, it's because it's like they might be in college, they might be at home, they might be away. There's still a real opportunity to make some shifts in relationships. I mean, it's more challenging when you've got someone who's 21, 22, if you have negative patterns that's gone on, but it's still possible. And I want parents to know that. They don't have to like, okay, they're gone, they're out of the house, there's nothing I can do. But I want them to know that there is some changes that they can still make. They can still learn better communication skills.
Yeah, I think that's very important because, as a child, you will have multiple different relationships with your parents, whether that's your mum or your dad or both of them as a unit. Obviously, as you grow up and you're a young child, and then you start, you're a teenager, and then you're an adult, and then you start having your own kids. Like, obviously, you change as an individual, and you go through multiple identities, and things change. So, therefore, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your friends, your family, your partner, like everything's going to evolve and change. So yeah, I don't see why we can't always be looking to do some work and be aware of like how we are communicating with each other. So yeah, it makes sense that you would work with those older um the parents of older children as well. I think that's obviously very important.
Mhm.
What
Yes.
what do you what do you think has led us into a position where we actually need professional psychological support for parenting? Obviously, that wasn't always available. So, what do you think? I mean, it's great that it is. It's wonderful that we've got so many different therapies available for so many different things. But what do you think has led us into the position that we require something like that?
Um, so first of all, I when I work with parents, I make sure that they understand that I'm a teacher. So I'm an educator. So there's nothing wrong with them psychologically. So if there is, if they feel like they have their own issues, deep issues from when they were younger, they need to deal with, I pass those on to somebody else. Or I work a lot with couples. I don't have to, but primarily I work with couples. So two people together, coming together, and they come in from different backgrounds. Um, and if they need marriage counseling, then I pass them on to somebody else. So I think since the beginning of time, I think parents have been trying to basically keep their children alive. Like that's been the fundamental concern. What do I do to keep them alive? It wasn't at all based on what is the relationship like between me and my kids. That's a very new concept. Like thinking of how are they feeling? How are they thinking? How do I connect with them? That is, that's maybe 50, 60 years. So very new. So if you have a new goal you're trying to reach, then you need to do new strategies to reach that goal. So what comes up all the time is parents, a lot of parents I work with, they're really wanting to change the relationship with their kids. And they old stuff comes up for them that they how they were parented that they didn't like, maybe shaming, blaming, humiliation, making kids feel bad to do better. Punishment has been a role model since the beginning of time. Okay, and that does not build a relationship. It might build one based on fear and intimidation and obedience. But when parents are saying, I want something more, right? I want my kids to talk to me when they have problems. How do I create an environment where they can do that? So then you can't take the old strategies. The old strategies got a certain result, but if you want a new result, you have to learn new skills. So that's why it's like nothing's wrong with parents. It's they're saying, I want a different outcome. So I need to learn new skills to get that outcome. It's very basic. And I really implore parents to not feel like they're a bad parent or they're supposed to know. You only know what you've learned, right? There's no innately, you don't innately know how to listen. You don't you only know how you were raised. And so parents, I feel, really need to let go of this guilt, or like, if I love my child, that's enough, or I should know how to listen, or and I really want parents to get rid of that. It's all skill based, because that's always what it was, right? It was always the mother, father teaching the kids how to parent, and all of a sudden you're saying, you know what, I want a different outcome. So I go to an expert, which is what I am, on really, I can really hear from what they tell me, what they're saying and doing. I can pick up on where they're um, creating a relationship that isn't going to turn out the way they want to. So an expert like myself can really hear that, hear the language, and then say, okay, let's shift your thinking. You're actually very adversarial. Let's shift your thinking towards your kids, and let's change away from you feeling like a victim, and let's have new language, and then you're going to get a different response from your kids. So it's education. That's all.
Interesting. So, I mean, it sounds like when you're discussing that, obviously you've got the experience with parents coming in and speaking with you, that they do want something new. They do want something different rather than their past experiences. Because I think maybe what we've got now is we've had generation after generation after generation of parenting in a very particular way, quite discipline based. Um, and as you say, parents now want more because we can take care of the survival stuff of keeping those children alive a bit easier these days. It's obviously not for everybody, but most people can provide food, can provide shelter, can provide warmth and protection. So yeah, that urging for something new and for something deeper, and I like to think that we as a society are getting slightly better at being open to being vulnerable and being open to our emotions a little bit better and being able to
Mhm.
communicate how that's actually working. I feel that there's obviously a whole genre of books and individuals out there who are doing a lot of that work. And when those individuals get to a certain age where they become aware of maybe their past patterns aren't serving them in the best possible way and they want to do some
Mhm.
self work to develop themselves, I think that's wonderful. And to have those outlets available for people is great. So going back in but going back in those generations and those histories, what do you think what's the source of this like really like discipline based punishment type of parenting? Where does this kind of like come from? Because we're
Right.
clearly breaking through it right now.
Right. So let me clarify language and definition of words so that people know, people who are listening know how I'm talking about it. So there's two kind of basic ways of parenting when there's a lot of parenting experts, and there's actually punishment is one way and discipline is the second way. Okay. So it's two different avenues, two ways of thinking. So punishment is based on how do I control my child to make them turn out the way I want them to? How do I control? So do I use shaming, fear, intimidation? What do I do to control them? So it's really about the parent having control. So discipline is based on teaching and guiding your child. So how do I teach them? What disciple? Discipline comes from disciple. So how do I teach and guide? How do I influence my children? And they're going to actually turn out the way what's best for them. So we give much more freedom to kids in terms of making choices for their lives than we do with punishment. Punishment is parents are the boss, they know what's best, and they're going to use whatever means they want to try to get the outcome they want for their child. But it's discipline, it's a different mindset. So when you were talking about this whole thing from the 50s 60s, the psychology, the introspection, like that's, think of how long human beings have been here and how new that is. Like that's really new to be self-reflecting. I mean, you see all these movies and plays of the olden times, they weren't sitting around and self-reflecting. So now parents are thinking, okay, what can I do differently to get a different result from my child? But what's happening, there's this huge conflict because the old punishment style keeps coming up because that's what's been around for so long. And that's where parents go when they're upset and angry. They resort to, all right, if you don't do this right now, then that's a punishment, right? If you don't, that's like a threat. They resort to that because kind of like a lower life condition. It's coming out from anger and control. And they are like, I don't want to do that. However, what's happening is to learn how to set guidelines and rules, which you have to do in a way that isn't shaming, is very difficult for parents to learn. Like, for example, an after then approach, which is the work before play. It's one of my favorites. Like my daughter, who's now a young woman, married, is the only way I'd get her to do that. Like, let's say clean the bathroom. Let's say she wanted to go to a friend's house. She's a teenager. And I would think, okay, what hasn't she done yet? Okay. So at the moment she's wanting to go, I'd say, oh, Oh, she hasn't cleaned the bathroom. After you clean the bathroom, then you can go. Of course, she'd complain. Wait a minute. All my friends are getting together now. Why didn't you tell me sooner? So as a disciplinarian, I ignore all of that stuff because she's trying to engage me into an argument. A parent in a punishment mindset would defend themselves and they would stay engaged. Instead, I just say, after the bathroom, then you can go. But you should have told me sooner. Again, another argument. Bathroom first. And it always worked. So you see how I'm not getting engaged with making her feel bad. What could I have said? Right? What would have been a great thing to say to make her feel bad?
Oh,
If if
you want an
you
example?
if
Yeah.
you yeah,
Yeah, if you don't do the bathroom, you're not going to go.
yeah. And then also, if you had done it sooner, like, don't blame me. It's not my fault you didn't do it. If you had done it earlier, then you can go off with your friends. See, so parents get into all this garbage that hurts the relationship. It really hurts it, and there's no need for it. So that's one of the big things I teach parents. How to be, when you're having to set a guideline, you get rid of all that shaming stuff. You just stick to the point. And you know what? It is amazing how it works. So I wrote
So
this
simple.
story, this particular one. Yeah, and so that's the thing. It's the judgment. There's so much judgment goes on. You're not good enough. You should have. Oh, I really work with parents on getting rid of the you should. You should, you need to, I want you to. Why didn't you? All of that hurts relationships. So when parents learn about that, like, oh my gosh, I mean, I can work on not saying these few words to start out and I'm going to get a different response. Like, isn't that simple, Simon? I mean, isn't like, oh, okay, I'm not going to say if you don't. I'm not going to say why didn't you? I'm not going to say how many times do I have to tell you, and instead I'm going to replace it with a few simple things. So that's what I love doing. Is like parents are like, oh my gosh, it's not like I'm an awful parent. It's just that I don't have the skills. That's all. I get excited
Yeah,
about it. It's
yeah, no,
very funny.
I understand the use of language is beautiful, and it can be implemented in such a powerful way to build bridges. And yeah, I have a lot of sympathy, especially for parents who have got like the young kids, like the one, two, three, fours, and they've basically been tired and sleep deprived for a few years, and being able to have the ability to communicate without that emotional aspect and immediately go into those should haves and you must do's and stuff like that. I totally understand. I've got my own personal experience with that. It's very difficult to do, but it's amazing that parents who come and see you finally have the awareness and the ability and the time to start thinking in a different way. And they've obviously always had they've always had the potential to understand your practice and your theory, right? But being able to put it into practice is not so easy. But being able to work with you and learn and have those skill sets is just wonderful. I've got a question on what do the majority of the parents who come and see you, what's their main goal? I'm sure they've got a lot of they come in and you have this initial conversation and they tell you the whole story, but I suppose it comes down to there's
Mhm.
one big reason why they've made this appointment with you. And what are the more common reasons?
They're arguing with their kids too much is a big reason, and they feel really bad about it. My kid argues about everything. I say, could you please help me unload the dishwasher? And they just argue it. Or I say it's time to get off the tablet, and they argue with me. So that sense of wanting to set limits, um, that are followed seems to be the most urgent they come in for. And then the secondary thing is They really want to have a better relationship. They really want to feel better with their kids. They want their kids to tell them more about their life and their problems. They want to have a teenager when they leave the house, or young adult, that's going to actually want to still see them and will call them and share and ask for support. That's
Yeah, I think
that's like
that's
that, and
every
that wasn't
parent's
there,
dream.
that wasn't there. Isn't that beautiful? It's like, okay, and so the thing is the 2 work hand in hand. It's like learning the language so you're not hurting the relationship, so you're not using shaming, blaming, humiliation, so learning how to set directives where you're not hurting it. Then I teach how to listen and respond when you're either doing collaborative problem solving or it's the child's problem to solve, how you do that. And when they're teenagers, how you manage the frustration you feel inside when they're doing stuff that you're going, oh my God, what are they doing? So, learning how to have unconditional love is a tough thing I try to teach as well.
Does how much does happiness come into it? Like I think obviously a lot of parents they just want to be happy with themselves. They want their kids to be happy, and they also want the communication and relationship to be happy as well. Like, there's a lot of layers there. Like there's a lot of individuals that need to do some work. So it's like, yeah, like how does happiness come into all of this?
I think one of the things that's important to realize is that problems lead to happiness, that having challenges and knowing how to overcome them and getting the support to get through hard feelings and difficulties, that is really happiness. That ability to do that, that's what builds this solid foundation of, okay, I come on life because life is full of problems. I can handle it. I've got my parents to support me. I mean, I think about those people who were well-known professional athletes or whatever. Almost always, they always say, my parent, I had a parent and adult who really supported me, don't they? Like when you think about it, they don't say, "Oh, I did it on my own." And so I think that's, to me, for my life, is like, it happiness isn't like, oh, having fun. So if parents think that I need to please my child to make them happy, I want to help them shift that. That's not, I mean, that's very transitory happiness, right? It just comes and goes if you get something. But to fundamentally build a relationship where you feel um, at home, I'm loved and I'm respected. Like, this is a safe place for me. To me, that's happiness. And then because when you have that foundation, then you can go out and enjoy, fleeting things that make a person happy. So I really want to help parents know how to build that bond. I worked very hard at it, and I have that with my daughter, because that was my big mission, was like, I want to know how to be a parent. And she had some major challenges happen to her. How can I be a parent that she feels can come to her? And so I've had many cards she wrote me as she was growing up saying, thank you for being there during the mountains and valleys, during the hard times and the easy times. That's what I treasure. Those are the cards I keep from my daughter, that I was there for her. So I don't know. To me, that's great happiness. Like, somebody, I'm helping somebody else, and I know I have the skills to know how to do that, especially with my daughter and my husband, who've been married for
Yeah.
a long time.
And that's not just an incredible achievement for you, but you're obviously passing on wisdom and a skill set to another human being who is going to um, be a certain way in the world and pass that on. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and we
Yeah.
talk she knows about, like, I communication blocks is one of the things I teach, and she knows all about those, and so wants us t they moved recently, and she wants us to move down there to be near her. So that's a high achievement, right?
Wow.
That's the
Yeah.
plan.
That's-
Come on, mom.
yeah. It's usually the opposite of that. So you've done something right. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I've worked and so here's the thing is my mother didn't know how to listen or support. I mean, she was born in the 20s. So she didn't know. And I can remember as a teenager, um, I was on bed crying because I had another fight with her. And I can remember hearing her out in the kitchen talking to my dad as though nothing had happened. Like I was devastated and she acted as though it didn't matter because that was her whole upbringing. And I was like determined, like, I don't want that. If I have a teenage daughter, I want something different. And so everything I teach parents, I had to learn. It wasn't like, oh, I had this great mother who knew how to do this and I learned it. It's like everything I teach parents what I had to change myself. Like I really had to do a lot of deep change of my thoughts, learn new language, learn a whole new skill set. So that's why I feel very confident that when people are determined, I want to change, I'm going to take responsibility for changing the relationship with my child. I'm not going to say they need to change first, because when you change, they change. That I can teach them because I learned it. And, there's no reason anybody else can't. It's not easy. And, you have to change patterns. You have to keep your mouth shut at times when you want to say things. However, I've worked with so many parents, hundreds of parents who just are like, feel so much happier when they change and they feel, better about what's coming out of their mouth, right? Rather than this negativity.
Certainly. Let's talk about those communication blocks because they're probably excuse me, they're probably some of the key setbacks that hold families back, and they probably creep up without a lot of parents really knowing that they're putting up these massive barricades between themselves and their kids. So can you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah. And um, my daughter encouraged me to watch this movie called Lady Bird because it's about a teenage girl and her mother. And so, if anyone wants to see in play communication blocks, you watch the movie Lady Bird. Because I was just watching it yesterday. As I was watching it, I was like cringing because what when a person is our kids or anyone is expressing some thoughts like I let's say you have a teenager and they're saying I'm not sure where I should go to school, or I don't know what I should study. So especially when a person has brought out something, or a friend saying I'm having this problem with this person I work with, or a child saying I can't do this homework, it's too hard. If it's something that somebody's expressing, that's usually it's done when they're the challenge. And so how we respond determines whether they keep talking or whether they shut down. And the gift that we can give a person, I think, is when we support a person with a sense of confidence in their brain that they can kind of figure things out. When we listen in a way that makes them feel that safe and secure, then what happens is their prefrontal cortex, the reasoning part of their brain, can gradually engage more. Let's say they're upset and they get upset. Oh, I can't do this. This is too hard. Or my boss is awful. Or, I just don't know what to do. Is when you listen in a way that allows them to keep expressing those emotions from the limbic system, then gradually they'll be able to engage their thinking part of their brain, the prefrontal cortex. So that's the important part of the blocks is we have to let the emotions out first. The emotional part of the brain has to be expressed, because as long as we're emotional state, we can't think. Right? I mean, and everybody knows that, right? When you're upset, and you make decisions, it's not the best decision. So the idea of a communication block is, or not blocking, is to think, how do I respond to my child so they will keep talking versus how am I responding now that would make them stop talking? So, child says, okay, I don't know where to go to school. I don't know what to study. And the parent says, well, you're really good at math. I think you should do that. So that is all of a sudden the parent giving advice, which is one of the communication blocks, unwanted advice. So that the teenager is like, okay, well, you know what's best. How can they talk anymore? Because they feel shut down and they feel hurt because you're acting as though you know more about their life than they know. And the parent thinks they're helping, right? Like, that's the intent often, is we think we're helping, but in that case it shut them down from talking. Even, let's say, and I love talking about it with adults because it deals with adults as well. So your friend says, I just can't stand my boss. They're just so difficult to work with. And let's say you say, yeah, you've said that before, and maybe you don't want to work there anymore. Maybe you really need to be in a better job than that. So this again is it's like, I know more what you should do than you know. And how would that make you feel if I said that to you, Simon, if I just started telling you what you should do?
Yeah, it's quite an invasive proposition because obviously there's so much that goes into that whole situation that I'm experiencing. There's a psychological element, there's an emotional element. It's very very deep, and I've experiencing it all with my senses all of the time. And then to have a very quick, callous response like that would be, it's not. Are you really listening to me? It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not being helpful. So what would be helpful if I respond in ways to allow you to keep talking so that you can get those big feelings out, and then you can come up with your decisions. So this is very clearly, I need to be a supporter. And so it'd be better response if I was like, oh, wow. Wow, that's hard. That's
Yeah,
it.
simple. Yeah,
Yeah. And so it's there's other things like asking questions that feel like interrogation is another way of shutting kids down. Like, even kids coming home from school and the parent says, how was school? That can feel like an interrogation. Even the kid says, hi dad, hi mom. Oh, how was school? Fine. And I get parents who say this, my kid won't talk to me about school. The reason probably is the underlying message of a question can feel like you've done something wrong, or whatever you're going to say, I'm going to tell you it needs to be different, or I'm going to start asking you more questions. So fundamentally, a question becomes an interrogation. And so
interesting.
kid doesn't want to talk to you, because that's a big thing that I get from parents. My kid won't talk to me. Well, it's like, okay, let's look at what do you say when they do tell you, right? So when I started learning about this, I first learned about this in my very first parenting education training program I had from a man named Michael Popkin. And I used several of his viewpoints in my book. And he said, fine, you can do that. And it was so exciting to think of, oh, so another thing not to say when somebody is expressing their own challenges is to talk about myself. A Me Tooism is a very common thing for parents to do. It's like the child says, I'm just not very good at English. This is awful. And the parent says, I really struggled when I was your age with English. Now, that may or may not be a block. So if the parent says, I really struggled too, and the child says, you did, what happened? Then it's not a block. You see how that child is still kind of trying to express. If the child says, it's different now, you don't know what you're talking about, leave me alone, then that has become a block.
Yeah,
So,
it's
and let me tell
the
one more. Yeah.
Okay, no, sorry, please carry
So let
on.
me just talk about yeah, placating is a big one. So sometimes there's parents who like to be tell kids what to do. I know best, and I'm going to give you advice, and that shuts them down. And then you have other parents who are like want to make their child feel better, which is called placating. So if the child says, I'm not getting along with Nikki, she's not calling me at all, she's not texting me, and I don't know what to do. And then let's say it's to the mom says, "Oh, goody, you know, honey, it'll be okay. Don't worry about it. You're just such a wonderful girl. You've got other friends." So mom's intention was to make her feel better because I don't want to see my baby, struggling. But the girl is left there going, right? Like, what my feel? I'm not listened to. You're not listening to me. What about my friend Nikki? They feel really deflated, and that's another way of a communication block.
Well, yeah, some really strong examples there. That's for sure. Yeah, just how we speak and how we hold our body language when we're speaking with anyone. To be honest, it's very, very can be very, very powerful. It can also be very, very damning to the relationship as well. I know I've become a better husband because I listen a lot better, and I if say one of my buddies who I grew up with is having a conversation with me and asking my advice or venting or whatever, my approach would be very, very different with my wife. We when we're aware and we learn and we can know how different people communicate, and we're sensitive to that. But there's certainly skills along the way that we should be developing, especially as you've got a partner of a certain amount of years and you have kids, and just so many different things come into it. How do parents when is it like when do we know when to listen, when to tell, when to collaborate, and when to give like freedom of choice? I mean, that's an interesting question in regards to
Yeah.
when do we use which skill?
Right. And I think that it's a fluid thing, and I mean, I certainly kept learning, and sometimes I made mistakes, and just so parents to know that there's no cut and dry. But so I think of it as there's three different roles that parents do. One is going to be, like you mentioned, that giving directions. When do you do what I call a director role? And then the other is, when do you collaborate? When do you come up with decisions together? And the third role is, when do you support? When do you let your child make the final decision? And it's very important to understand director, collaborator, and supporter so that you have the right role. Now, your kids might not always agree with the role that you've chosen. So but for example, a director is when you, like I shared, the after then strategy is a director role strategy. I wasn't letting my daughter choose. At one point, we discussed that she was going to clean the bathroom. That had already been discussed. But at that moment, I wasn't going to let her decide whether to do the bathroom or not. I pulled up a director role strategy, right? Now, some parents, if the kid says, "Oh, I'll do it later," and you get fooled and you say, "Oh, okay." Parents get fooled by that all the time. That was incorrect. Then you were letting your child decide when it was going to happen. And you know what? It isn't going to happen. So that's the time you need to say, "No, this is my job as a parent. They need to do chores." I'm a real big thing on chores. You don't do tons of them, but every kid needs to contribute to the household. And you have to pull it up and say, "Well, this needs to be done." You can do the after then, or it's time to do the bathroom. Um, and to know that their angst, their frustration, that they can handle it. Like, be really careful to not be fooled and give them power. So, anyways, such as emptying the dishwasher, getting off the internet, things that they don't want, that you want because it's a rule, a guideline, safety things, then you need to be a director. And when you can do it where you're not shaming the kid, you're not making them feel bad, then they can hear it and they can handle it. So it's time to put the laundry away. But I want to watch this show right now. It's time for the laundry. But after the laundry, then you can watch the show. And then you might even stick an empathy statement. Well, you really love that show. Don't say, I know. Usually that doesn't work. I know you really, no, don't say that. It's not about you. Just, yeah, you really love that show. Period. Don't say but. Please do not say you really love that show, but you have to do the laundry, because then it's not, then it takes away from your empathetic statement. Yeah, it's a great show. After you do the laundry, you can watch it. So I want parents to have confidence when they state it, and you can even smile, like, this is it. Then your kids will respect you more, and they'll respond more, and they'll cooperate more. Okay, so that's the director role. And it's like, buck it up, parent, you got to do it.
Right? It sounds just like you're not stepping into the emotional arena in that type of situation. Obviously, like a 13-year-old who's like watching the show and doesn't want to do the dishwasher, there's going to be some emotions that come up for that. That's absolutely normal. It's okay, very natural. But yeah, as the parent, as the director, you're not stepping into that emotional arena, because no one wins in that situation. Like, if you're just going to throw emotion at emotion, it's just going to be a cluster.
Yeah. And they're trying to get what they want in their life. So, okay, and you are helping guide them on this path so that they are learning certain skills for life, right? Kids have to learn how to contribute to the household. They're in a dorm room. They have to have learned already that they pick up their things. That's a skill. It's a skill as important as schoolwork. I'm sorry. How do you contribute to the family? So when the kid's mad at you, you have to be mindful that you might get triggered. Like, my kid needs to listen to me. Why are they so disrespectful? It's important. I help parents realize what are they thinking that will make them get triggered. So if you realize that, and then you say, no, I'm not going there. I'm just, okay, my kid's doing their thing to get their needs met. I'm just staying the course, being clear. One dad had these 2 teenage boys, and he had a really hard time getting them to do what they're supposed to do with the chores. And he did the after then. And he was telling me he had to do it like 5 times. Like, he had to, each time he had to repeat it, fewer and fewer words. And the teenage boys finally said, oh, all right. And they did it. Like they knew dad had won because dad stayed the course. Well, I don't remember what the chore was. And he didn't falter, and the kids gave in. So the kids need to feel your strength. I call it soft power. It's not hard. It's not harsh. It's not mean. It's not yelling. Yelling is not a very effective means to get kids to cooperate. Okay, so collaborate. I encourage parents to have collaborative discussions, such with things that impact everybody, such as chores. That impacts everybody in the household, right? If the dishes aren't done, what do you eat off of? If the groceries aren't gotten at the store, if they aren't, all of those things, that there should be a collaborative discussion. And you start out with, okay, guys, this impacts everybody. Let's get together. Let's talk about what are all the things that need to be done. And then let's divide them up. So once you do that, this makes it sound easy. I have several chapters in my book about collaborative problem solving. Once you do the problem solving, then chances are you have to be a director to make sure they follow through. So, for example, I gave the example of my daughter cleaning the bathroom. That was one of the chores she was doing. It doesn't mean that on her own she's going to do it. So I think parents get upset. They say, we made this chore chart and now you're not doing it.
Sure.
You said
Yeah.
you were going to do it. You get what I'm saying,
Oh
Simon?
yeah, I do.
Yeah. So I encourage parents, once you post the chore chart and then know they still don't want to do it, but you've done the collaborative problem solving and you're still going to probably need to do a director role strategy. That's just how it is. And don't get angry about it. Like, that's your job. I'm sorry, you're the parent. That's your job. That's that's why you had kids too, is to help them become responsible, not by trying to make them feel responsible, but by you setting up expectations and not backing down and not getting mad, by them doing it over and over again, then they'll develop that sense of that this is their responsibility. It might not happen till late teenage years. So uh, I think parents get these expectations, they get mad at their kids. And then the third one, I know we need to wrap this up probably, is the supporter role. Like if it's their problem to solve, like a friendship issue, then you can say, honey, this, like the thing with my friends not texting me or not calling me. Wow, this sounds like a real challenge. You'll make the decision what to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I can be here for you. We can just kind of throw around ideas, or I can just listen, but it's going to be up to you to decide, because kids need to hear that, because most of the parents I work with have taken over their kids' problems. Like they've jumped in as a director, like, I need to fix it. I can't see my kids suffering. So what happens? Then the kid stops talking to them, because if they open up, dad or mom's going to tell me what to do. So I don't want to talk to him. So if you're trying to make a change and become more of a supporter, it's important to say to your kids, I think I did this in the past. I was always telling you what to do. Is that what I did?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I'm
think
really working on not doing that.
yeah, it's all if you have the perspective as a parent that you are essentially training your children for the real world, because you're not always going to be there to be their director. You're teaching them to become their own director. I think if you have that perspective, then it is a lot easier to not step into that emotional battleground and then stay in this prefrontal cortex of analytical thinking and kind of staying in the moment and keeping your role. And by you keeping your role, you're serving your child a lot better. I think, yeah, having that perspective as a parent would be a lot easier if you're able to just hold that thought in your mind whilst you're engaging with your kids. And you mentioned about, like, sitting around and discussing the chores and collaborating with the family. That kind of comes into the benefits of, like, having consistent family meetings. And what kind of age would you do that with a child?
So you can have family meetings starting around age 4 or 5 when they're pretty young. And what's important, a family meeting, it's helpful to have a certain structure, and that you make sure that you start out with compliments of each other. Like, start out with something really positive. It's not like, okay, we need to have a family meeting to talk about something where I'm upset with you about. It's better to have it like, this is an opportunity for everyone to bring up their issues, to talk about it. But let's start out with, what do you want to thank somebody in the family about? Or what do you appreciate? So you want it to be, you're coming together as an opportunity to share. And then also, I encourage people to have actual piece of paper where people can write down what they want to talk about during the week. So for kids, like, I think I should stay up till 9:30. It isn't fair, that kind of an issue. And you want to discuss that, you can say, hey, put it on. That might be something you want to talk about as the whole family. If there's a conflict about that, it's up to you to decide whether you want to or not. You can say, hey, why don't you put it on the chart, on the list of things to talk about? Maybe we can talk about that next week. So it gives them an opportunity to know, okay, there's an issue I have, and there's a forum where I can talk about it. And then you also want to talk about something nice during the family meeting. Like, Maybe you've got the afternoon. What are we going to do on vacation? What are we going to do together, or something nice, and then end up with something nice, a treat or a game. So it helps bring everybody together, so that you're not, because otherwise I'm going to tell you, parents and everybody's so busy, like nobody has time. But if you, let's say you said 45 minutes every week. Now, with little kids, you might only start out with 20 minutes. That might be as long as a 5-year-old could handle it. By the time they're teenagers, you know, um, 40 minutes, 45 minutes to be okay. And we did it for many years with my daughter. So we have one daughter, and it was always hard for her. It was like, I'm the only kid. But we have all the notes we took. So you keep notes about what was planned. We have notes about what, like, she, at one point, she wanted a basketball hoop. And so she called up stores. This is before you had the internet. She called up stores to find out how much they cost and when they're going to be on sale. So because of this desire she had, we didn't jump in and fix it. She took responsibility to find out things. And that builds a kid's sense of maturity when they take over responsibility for things. So doing that in a family meeting is really, really helpful. Or maybe you want to go somewhere and you say, hey, how about, okay, why don't you, Bobby, why don't you check out some of the hotels if they're old enough to do that, right? And bring it back the next meeting. What would that cost? Let's look at what our budget is. So that's where kids start to feel responsible and good about themselves, when they're actually contributing to the family.
That's really cool. I think starting with something positive about the family, that's very, very interesting. And bringing notes from the week, that's amazing. And then finishing up the evening with like a game or a movie night or something that you doing together. And then you end up having like an hour, a couple of hours of you just all together, which is just an old fashioned idea of family time, I suppose.
Isn't
Weird.
it? And one to come together, and allowance. I encourage that your kids to have weekly allowance to learn how to manage money. So that's another thing that we always talked about. What was the money going to be used for? What was she going to spend it on a movie? So that way, if she knew her money was used for movies, then she never asked me for money for a movie. If she wanted to go, she didn't have the money, she didn't go. So I never was nagged for money for things, because I helped her become empowered for a certain amount of money and for her to learn how to budget it. So allowance is another important thing to be included in the family meetings, to talk about that, the money, what the money is going to be used for.
Yeah, certainly a
Money.
very, very important part of the family dynamic and learning the value of it and learning that you can, even from a young age, you can create your own wealth. I think that's an incredibly powerful thing to teach a child from a young age. What what they can possibly do with that information, that they know that they can use their mind and their physical body to actually create money. And then as they get older and their skill sets increase and everything else, it's just a massively powerful tool to teach children. So yeah, I think that's also a very amazing thing. We're gonna have to finish up there now, Cynthia. So can you let people know how they can connect with you, please?
Yeah. I think going to allyparenting.com is a great first step. My book is Ally Parenting. You go to allyparenting.com. It'll take you to my website that will also talk to you about the private one-on-one coaching I do, the speaking. I've talked to over 600 schools. I think that's the best place. And then I do have, I think my Instagram is ally dash parenting, or ally parenting, also on Instagram. That's another place that I post information. And my book is really there as a guide, and will give you very, very specific information about what I've been talking about. And so you can find that on Amazon at, actually, I think it's bit.ly ally dash parenting, or just Cynthia Klein Ally Parenting. You can find me. And it's an Audible as well as soft cover. I'd love to share the wisdom that I have with everyone.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, we'll make sure that All of those links are available in the show notes to your website, to your social media, and to the book. But thank you so much for your time today. I've learned. I mean, I've got two young children, and I've learned quite a few things tonight. So I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Glad I could help.
Great.
It's been
Well,
great to be here, Simon.
yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. This has been True Hope Cast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. If you're listening on iTunes, leave a little review. Takes a minute, and it's very, very helpful. So thank you very much for that. But we will see you next week. Thanks.